Hello, friends, and welcome. We This is our we're on a retreat. I'm trying to figure out what to say here. Uh, this is a day of retreat. This is the last Sunday of July, and we're having a grand time. We're doing some teachings and some meditations, and this is our regular Sunday class. Today, we're going to be teaching on generosity. But before we start, let's take a moment to appreciate our community gathered here today. Today, I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like minded friends, sharing this present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today, I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds, transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, and to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Oh, again, welcome everybody to our Sunday retreat teaching. My name is Venerable Tarpa. Today we're going to be doing a teaching on generosity. And I have to admit right at the beginning that I always feel a little funny teaching on generosity because I feel like I'm asking for a handout, which you'll see through the teachings. That's not what this teaching is about. But it does coincide with our summer fundraiser. So we're right in the middle of our summer fundraiser, trying to get enough donations in to cover all of our internet costs and everything else. So generosity is probably the most prescribed practice in all traditions of Buddhism. It is extensive in all the various groups. Um, but um, it's taken to its highest degree in the Mahayana tradition, and especially in the path of the Bodhisattva. The practice of generosity is the first of the six perfections, which are the practices of Bodhisattva. The six perfections are supreme generosity, supreme goodness, supreme patience, supreme joyous effort, supreme concentration, and supreme wisdom. So there's a reason why it's first in the paramitas. Um, the practice of generosity traditionally includes the sharing of resources, protection, care, love, one's time, and oneself. But revered most is the sharing of the Buddhist teachings, uh, and which is asserting effort to helping others to liberate themselves from suffering. So, to help others to be free of suffering is the greatest of all generosities. In SBT, we have a practice for bodhisattvas, and that's our four gifts practice. And the four gifts is a practice of generosity that you give to the world, and it's your gifts of stability, calmness, caring, and happiness. And what makes them so powerful is the four gifts um, is that they're contagious. When we practice stability, it people around us become more stable. When we calm down, people around us become calmer. When we care and show care, it's contagious, and people around us find, care more for others. And I think we all know that happiness is really contagious. When that happy person walks into the room, I think everybody smiles a bit, if they're not too happy, that is. Um, so we have various practices with SPT on the practice of generosity itself. Um, but the practice of generosity goes so much deeper than that, right? So we can think about general generosity, and I think we all think of money when we think of generosity. Giving giving some money to a homeless person on the street, or donating some money to a worthy charity. But I think money is probably the easiest of charities. A wonderful gift, but it's one of the easiest of all charities, and maybe the most difficult one for us is our time, right? I think for most of us, our time is probably the most essential thing to us. So giving of your time is a difficult one. Giving of yourself, being available to others. Generosity can be a really subtle quality, and a really, really beautiful one. When we give of our time, when somebody's having a difficult time, and we just take the time to listen, it's such an absolutely beautiful act of generosity. And so the Mahayana path, and especially the Bodhisattva, and we have people taking Bodhisattva vows today. Um, Again, this practice is really highlighted, and the practice of the generosity of a Bodhisattva is quite unique. So we talk about these surface level generosities, and I hate to call them surface level because that kind of diminishes them. They're just as beautiful as others, but when we start, that's a starting point. That's a starting point. These general generosities that we're all familiar with, that we all grew up with, that our mothers taught us, our mothers and fathers taught us. But as you practice generosity, you discover deeper and deeper levels of it. And for the Bodhisattva, everything in one's life becomes an act of generosity. So you might ask, well, why do the six perfections all use the word supreme? It doesn't say generosity, it says supreme generosity, supreme goodness, supreme patience, supreme joyous effort, supreme concentration, supreme wisdom. They're not just saying it to kind of in an honorific way. They're saying it because they're really talking about a supreme level of these practices. And in all of them, they're making a distinction between everyday common people's practice of those, which we all do, right? Our moms and dads taught us how to be generous. Most of us are generous people. We're good people. We put effort into our lives. We have a level of concentration in the work we do, and we have a level of wisdom from all the work we've been doing, especially Dharma practitioners. You guys study diligently, right? So we have those qualities. But we're talking about here with Supreme, we're talking about at the level of a very high practitioner, a bodhisattva, or an awakened being, right? So we think about our everyday generosity. I have friends that are so generous. The friend I'm living with now, let me stay here for half a year without paying any rent. I mean, what an amazing thing. But when we're talking about supreme generosity, we're talking about generosity at a whole different scope, a generosity that most people aren't even aware of. And so, for the bodhisattva who practices generosity, when their intention in life is to awaken for the benefit of all beings, and when that intention becomes so focused that is their main thought. They call it the mind of bodhicitta for a reason. Bodhicitta is the mind of awakening for anybody that's not. It's this altruistic mind, right? This awakened altruistic mind that that is solely concerned with the benefit of others. And when all of your life gets so focused on the act of benefiting others, um, your perception starts to change. And what happens is everything you do in life to sustain yourself starts to become an act of generosity for others. And even if you're not a big fancy bodhisattva like the picture I'm painting now, even if you've taken bodhisattvas with us here and you're just a regular person who does his best to try to benefit the world, even in that capacity, the work that you're doing to benefit the world, well, guess what? Feeding yourself, housing yourself, taking care of yourself, those all become acts of generosity because they're allowing you to benefit others. And so what happens is for the bodhisattva, their lives become quite magical. Their lives become lives of virtue, where everything they do for themselves is for the benefit of others, right? And even simple things like pleasure, like fun, entertainment. I mean, if it's helping the bodhisattva to be a healthy person, and fun's very important to be healthy, then those have an impact on other people. So everything the bodhisattva does ends up as a source of generosity towards others. So you can see how this creates this virtuous bubble that a bodhisattva lives within. And the idea is that the bodhisattva helps others, but at the same time, the bodhisattva knows by helping others, they're helping themselves. And so it becomes a symbiotic relationship. By helping others to awaken, it's aiding the bodhisattva to awaken themselves. And by the bodhisattva awakening, he's aiding others in awakening. So the bodhisattva lives in this world of virtue. And especially if you get up to the level of monastics and things like myself, where I live only on the kindness of others. Monks aren't permitted to make profit. We're not allowed to work for money. And so all the work I do is for the benefit of others. And I'm sustained by wonderful people like you that make small donations to keep me alive. My job is to live in a very simple way, so I'm not a burden upon any of you, that I don't need extravagant things. But you end up living in a world of virtue. It's just an absolutely amazing thing. And so what happens is nearly everything in your life is seen as an act of generosity, whether it's for you or for others. If your only concern is to awaken for the benefit of others, then everything you do for yourself facilitates that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I also wanted to talk about Padmasambhava had some really interesting thoughts on the idea of generosity, and here kind of related to the idea of karma, right? This idea of these meritorious qualities of goodness, of generosity, kindness. And I think with karma, most people nowadays have the idea that karma is some form of reward and punishment, and that when you do good acts, when you're generous, when you do acts of goodness, when you do random acts of kindness, people kind of see it like they're filling up their piggy bank full of goodness and for future rewards. Um, but Padmasambhava was, I'm sorry, Shantideva, the 8th century Indian Buddhist master, had a much different take on this. And he believed that the cultivation of these qualities wasn't so much about earning goodness like we think karma is, but instead it was about the opposite. It was about reducing our own miserliness and our attachment and grasping to worldly concerns. I think this is a more appropriate way for us to look at generosity on a deeper level. The normal way we look at generosity, we teach the kids that they're earning goodness, they're being good people. That's wonderful. But I think at a deeper level, when you really engage generosity, you need to look at it like that you're working on getting rid of, eradicating your own miserliness, you know? When you're not being generous, what are you doing? You're holding on to something, right? Okay. Um, I have a meme here by this is by Padmasambhava. I'm sorry, I was getting the two confused. Padmasambhava was one of the first Indian masters to take Buddhism to Tibet. He's considered by Tibetans to be the second Buddha. And he has this lovely quote: "To be generous doesn't merely mean to give without bias or partiality. It means to be profoundly free from attachment to anything whatsoever." So you can see this is a very different way of looking at generosity, isn't it? um, and another thing I'd like to impart upon you is another way of looking at generosity. We should be looking at generosity as something that is as an act of giving, which is common, right? That's what we think about generosity, of the altruistic act of giving. And now this might be a subtle difference, but I think it's a profound one. We should be seeing generosity as the act of sharing, not giving, not "this is mine, I give to you. How what a great person I am. Here you go." Generosity should be the act of sharing. And sharing doesn't mean giving away everything you own, right? People often will ask that. Well, what do you do in generosity? We want to practice supreme generosity, but I can't just give away all my things to everybody in the world. Well, that's the act of giving. But sharing, that's not how sharing works. Sharing means giving what you can, where you're still taking care of yourself. So I want everybody to think about that when we talk about generosity. Generosity is really the act of sharing, and about our work in losing our attachment for all the things in our lives, right? So some attachments are worthwhile. We don't want to lose our attachment to family and friends, and those are worthwhile attachments. It's the question of when we have neurotic attachment, right? And Buddhism likes to talk about grasping and clinging and this kind of attachment. Regular attachment, that there's some beautiful attachments that are out there. We do suffer from all of them. There's no doubt about that. When you have a loving family and you love them very much and you're attached to them, of course you suffer. Every time they walk out the door, you worry that something might happen. But it's worthwhile suffering. It's worthwhile attachment, right? But neurotic attachment, especially at worldly concerns, that's what we really want to kind of move away from. And so for the Bodhisattva, generosity stops being an act that we do occasionally, and generosity becomes a style in which we live our lives. It's an openness to all the people around us. It's living life in an open way that shares the resources you have while still taking care of yourself. But it's this openness we're trying to cultivate. It's this sense of contentment and the abandonment of these worldly concerns and attachments. Right? That's what real generosity is about. So it doesn't really matter why you're generous. You just have an openness. When somebody needs a banana, you give them a banana. They need $1, you give them $1. They need a they need a couple minutes of your time to talk about a problem. You're there. We talked about the Bodhisattvas having very different intentions than common people, where most of us have intentions. They're kind of they often call it a linear intention, where we think, I'll do this and then this will be the result and then I'll feel good about it. We have this planned out idea of our intentions, and especially our altruistic acts when we think about generosity and things like that. If you've ever given money to a homeless person who doesn't say thank you, you notice you get mad, right? He didn't say thank you because you wanted that little extra thing. But the Bodhisattva doesn't have this linear intention. Instead, the Bodhisattva lives in an open way with the world around them, in a sharing way. And they don't have to go around proving what generous person they are. They don't have to go around ticking all their boxes and doing all the right things. They just open up their lives, they open up their resources to others. And so generosity becomes a lifestyle, that their life is open to others. And in turn, people will open their lives to you. It's a very beautiful thing, yeah. Um, and One of the things about this lifestyle is that these are in line with our true nature. This is one of the reasons where it becomes so magical, because we often talk about our Buddhism asserts our true nature as being altruistic and compassionate and kind and wise and pure. They use the word pure, but Buddhism asserts that our true nature is we're just beautiful beings, and the problems we have are these afflictions that are kind of over the top of all of that. And what we're trying to do is clean off those afflictions. Often they'll say, like washing a dirty window. We're trying to get rid of all the filth so that sunshine can shine through the window. So this is the idea of Buddhism. So these practices of altruism, generosity, goodness, they're all in line with our true nature. So as we practice them, we all align ourselves with our true nature, and life simply becomes better. Okay, I'm wondering if I'm forgetting anything here. And so for the Bodhisattva, and I usually talk about this in the Bodhisattva ceremony we'll have later on, but for the Bodhisattva, with this intention that they're just open to the world, they're just open to helping, that when the need arises, they spontaneously and effortlessly attend to what needs to be attending. In SPT, we call this shining. So the Bodhisattva just shines. He sits in a chair just shining. His goodness, his skills, his talents, his 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 care, his love. And when things need to be attended to, they just automatically get done because of that pure nature. When somebody's suffering, they can't stop from helping. When something needs to be done, they're out of the chair even before they think about it. So this is what we call the practice of shining. And shining is a lot more than just simply the sweet qualities like goodness and altruism. We can be ferocious in our shining. We can shine with courage and fearlessness. Think about freedom fighters. We can shine with maturity and wisdom. And so to shine, we can shine with all of our greatest qualities. And I think that that's all I wanted to share about generosity. Does anybody have any questions about generosity? I have some questions for you if you don't have any questions. what do you think the most overlooked form of generosity is? There's many forms of
Our
generosity.
time, I think it's overlooked how much time people commit.
Yeah, Donna agrees. It really is. Or how about just ourselves? Not just our time, but just physically being there for others. I guess it's kind of related to time, isn't it? But just to be a good friend, to be a good parent, to be a good sibling, it's a wonderful act of generosity. How about listening? Listening is a wonderful act of generosity, yeah? Especially maybe some of us are older parents and things like that when they just want to ramble on about their TV shows and you just sit there and listen. It's a beautiful thing to do, isn't it? Yeah, wonderful. Um, can you see generosity as more than simple giving? Can you see it as a style or attitude towards life? This is the level that Buddhism is talking about with generosity, right? Can you imagine the Buddha and this sense of generosity? I don't think the Buddha's running around giving people sandwiches, right? The Buddha's just occupying that space, which is like the supreme act of generosity. Mike, did you have a comment?
Yeah, kind of related to your thoughts about listening. Something I've noticed is when I'm in a conversation with people and they're wanting to tell a story and they tell their story, oftentimes I have a tendency to not be listening carefully because I'm already wanting to plan the story I want to tell. I think generosity is when I kind of let go of that urgent need to tell my story and to just get into their story with them.
I agree. I noticed I didn't have my microphone on. Was it still okay? I guess nobody was complaining. You're right, Mike. They have a funny saying about that. They say, "Do you listen or do you wait to talk?" It's true, isn't it? I think most of us just wait to talk, right? Yeah, listening is an incredible generosity, and you're right. It's about attachment, isn't it? You have to kind of let go of your self-importance to be fully present to listen to someone else. That's a great example of it. Oh, that's a lovely thing. Can you imagine the benefits of embodying generosity in this way? Can you see the true benefits of seeing generosity as this act of sharing your life with the world? This opening up, right? Because the opposite of generosity really is just us closing ourselves off to the world around us. This is all mine. It's us and them, right? Where generosity, the real act of generosity erases those lines. There's no more us and them. It's being open to everyone. Wangmo?
I have a question. What do
Yeah.
we do when we're dealing with people who take advantage of our generosity?
So you remember when we were talking about compassion, we had this term idiot compassion. And idiot compassion was helping others in a way that harms us. And an example would be, not to pick on the homeless, but it's always a great example. Say you see a homeless person in the street and it's cold out, and out of kindness, you decide to take them home. But the next day when you wake up, all your things are missing. That's an act of idiot compassion. All of these qualities require wisdom as well. Generosity can be the same. maybe even more so. There could be idiot generosity to keep giving money to somebody that's using it in bad ways or harming themselves. In all the things we do, wisdom has to be an integral quality in every decision we make. So you have to be smart. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is not give that person something, right? If they're going to hurt themselves, maybe, yeah. I hope that's helpful. Sangpo?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me okay. We've got traffic outside, it's motorway and it's in a cheap travel lodge. But I think one of the things that sort of strikes me is, in terms of being generous, is actually just being generous to, the world around us, when we're, walking, when we're out, when we're doing things, when we're being, kind to nature, being generous to nature, looking at, just that general feeling, of being selfless to a certain degree. Because quite often when you see what's going on around, it's the opposite of selfless. And, I think it's accepting. It used to anger me, but now I just accept it, that these people are just blind and they'll find their way, but generally it used to anger me, but not as much now. I focus more on the.
I think you're completely right. Kindness is one of the great generosities, especially sometimes we're not in a kind mood. Maybe you're irritated and you're at a shop or something and you decide to be kind even though you don't feel like being kind. Kindness is a great generosity. And you're right, Sampo. So it's all about being selfless, right? We're less self-absorbed, right? The world, everything isn't about you, yeah, beautifully said. What do you guys think of the benefits of this? So if this is if this is what we're talking about doing, and I'd like everybody to contemplate this and start to practice this, to look at generosity as the act of sharing and the act of losing our attachment. And I want everybody to start practicing opening themselves up to the world. We do it in little ways. We get better and better, especially our bodhisattvas and our new bodhisattvas to be that we're going to make today. This idea of just opening ourselves up. And for me, it kind of, it's interesting because in an odd way, it kind of highlights how closed off I've been and didn't realize it. I think most of us don't realize that we're closed off from the world, right? We're generous in our own little personal circles. We're quite selfless when it comes to family. You don't think twice about being generous to your children or your spouse. But to open that up further, to me, it's a kind of an epiphany. It's a great understanding of how closed off we are and how much we need to just let go of that attachment and open up fully to the world around us. With wisdom, we don't want, the world's a dangerous place. We want to be smart in how we do it. David.
One of the things that I love about generosity, to the extent that I am generous, is the benefits that I get out of it. If I'm generous, then people just are much more positive towards you. So there's a kind of virtuous circle with generosity, in that, as I say, people tend on the whole to feel better about you, and you feel better about them, and on it goes. I had a particular example of I've been trying recently, if I'm feeling well, to share that with people, just in people in the street and anything like that. And in the morning when I have my cup of coffee down at the beachfront, I kind of nod and smile to people if I feel like that, which is nearly all the time, and they feel a lot better too. And there's a kind of as I say, a virtuous circle there. However, there's a couple of people who've discovered, maybe they're very lonely or something like that, that I'm a willing ear, and they just come and sit and talk to me the whole time that I'm there, kind of spoiling my meditative look at the sunshine and drinking my coffee.
It's true.
And I'm not sure what to do with that.
You have to be
They advise
skillful.
me. Yeah.
You have to know. You have to have boundaries, and you just learn little tricks. You learn little things to say, and yeah. But it's new territory, so you have to kind of figure it out as you go along. Somebody mentions here, I agree with you completely. Pema says a friend takes advantage of your time on the phone or there. You say no. Yeah, you learn how to have boundaries, and you say little things. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I can't talk right now. You have to have wisdom and have boundaries. I'm good at saying no. I'm very generous, but I'm also really good at saying no in a nice way. There was an expression that we had for appreciation. I think it works with generosity as well. The lack of generosity, or generosity, is such a profound practice because its opposite is such a profound affliction. I think that's very true. Yuntan?
Yeah. I think the thing that hit me most was your quote about having no attachments, because that seems to me to be the essence. If we can have no attachments, it seems to take care of everything else. Rather than focusing on generosity, shouldn't we be focusing on the practice of having no attachments? Wouldn't that be, because then everything else is taken care of? It really hit me hard, and I thought, well, yeah, because that really does take care of everything.
You're right. Now the question is, are we merely misunderstanding the practice that the Buddha gave when the Buddhas gave us the practice of generosity? Initially, was it meant to be a teaching on losing attachment? And did we just misunderstand it and change it over all these years? Like in Asia now, it's they're great at donations. They're notorious for the huge amount of donations that they'll give to temples and things, but it's always transactional. They're doing it so their businesses will succeed, so they'll be able to sell their house, so their kids will go to a good school. And so I think that's what it's become. And I guess maybe today's talk, that's what I'm hoping to get through to everyone, that generosity is different than we think it is in the Buddhist context. It's much more of this. And again, and you talked about, well, should we be teaching it about non-attachment? But I don't think that that's it either. I think it's openness. It's the middle way between the two, right? It's just an openness. Now, learning to be open like that gets rid of the attachment, and it opens us up to the generosity. So I think ultimately the practice is just opening ourselves up to the world. But I agree with you.
Right. Okay.
That's my 2 cents. Would anybody else like to share? Miss Darcy, Tashi.
So would the non-attachment be like not expecting a result to go this way or that way, not being attached to the result of your actions, whether they're, if it's a good action, or you're being generous, not having to have some kind of feedback?
Boy, attachment is just, it permeates every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
Attachment to the outcome of events. Every event, whatever it is. We have an attachment. We favor an outcome to everything in our lives. And that's a form of attachment. But it's a spectrum. In small ways, that's not a big problem, right? And especially if you know that mechanism is happening, if you're aware of it, it's not much of a problem. I have all kinds of attachments, but I'm also aware of those attachments, so I don't suffer from them. I'm very much attached to everybody here today, deeply, deeply attached. And when any of you suffer, I suffer, but I deem it worthwhile. But I understand the mechanism. So the idea of us all losing all attachment, the Buddha was attached. The Buddha, when the Buddha's top 2 disciples passed away in the later Sangha, the Buddha was really saddened by it and talked about it in the sutras. So, we get into this dualistic black and white thinking. And it's just not the case. The thing about it is it's understanding how attachment works and learning how to lessen it to have a more productive, skillful, wholesome, virtuous style of attachment. To get rid of the attachments we don't need. Yeah, that's what it's really about. I hope that answered your question.
It did. And I think I've let go of a lot of attachments in the last 2 years, since I've been here. So
I think
it's been
many
easier.
more. I think so many more than you're aware of. And some of our strong attachments are invisible. Attachment to view, that's the deepest one of all, because enlightenment itself is view, right? Perspective, right? Right view. Enlightenment itself is a perspective, and nirvana is a view of ourselves in reality, and samsara is. And so ultimately that's the deepest of all. It's having an attachment to wrong views, and we learn how to get rid of those. So we have attachment to ideologies and all kinds of things. Yeah, we have attachment to and some of our attachments are habits. Oh, they're just everywhere. Yeah. We hope we're not keeping you up, Gawa. Are you okay? You look like the reclined Buddha, actually. Would anybody else like to share? I hope our teaching was helpful today. It's a really important topic. And yes, Pema, please.
Donna had written, opening ourselves up to the world takes courage.
Sure does. And the closing off from the world comes from fear. So you're right about that. Yeah. But being happy takes courage as well. Closing ourselves off from everything and living in little worlds of our own is no way to be happy.